Welcome to So in the Know, a podcast that brings real stories and expert insights into the world of shared ownership. I'm your host, Sarah Ellis, and today, by popular demand, I'm joined by a SO Resi customer, a doctor by profession who bought her first home through shared ownership. Now, we'll be talking about that home buying journey, but also what it's really like to live in a shared ownership home. I'm also joined today by a SO Resi senior sales consultant who's going to help break down that shared ownership process. So whether you've already started your journey or you just want to learn more about shared ownership, this podcast is for you. So go get a cuppa, get comfy. This is So in the Know. Welcome, Rochelle and Jacqui, to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Rochelle, you're our SO Resi customer.
Yeah.
What I'd really like to do throughout this podcast is sort of go through the motions. So what was that decision-making process like? What was it like buying a shared ownership home and then that lived-in experience? So let's take it right the way back to the beginning. Why was it that you considered shared ownership? Why was it the option for you?
I think one of the most appealing parts of the shared ownership process is the fact that you have ownership over part of the property, but you don't need to amass a large deposit, because I think that still is one of the major turn-offs to most people on the open market, is having to amass that very large deposit and being able to sign away that and know that you're not going to see that again. So I think for me, being able to create and save for a smaller deposit but still having a stake ownership in the property was really attractive to me.
And how was it that you heard about SO Resi?
So if I take it back to kind of how I heard about shared ownership, because I started off by trying to figure out what this shared ownership thing was first. So I think I was looking through kind of various property platforms that are generic and are out there, and I started seeing these properties that were 120,000, 150,000, and I was wondering how could they be so cheap. And then I started seeing the percentage, 25, 35, 45%. I didn't know what that meant, so I started looking into what did that mean in terms of shared ownership, looking on the shared ownership kind of website, and then I started looking in my general area, and then SO Resi came up for the development, some developments in the kind of surrounding area that I was looking in, and so I started looking into them as a kind of company to see if that was the right fit for me or not.
So had you actually heard about shared ownership before you'd started this journey?
No, so I hadn't heard about it before at all. It was only kind of come across it just by looking at various kind of normal property platforms that I came across, kind of an introduction to what shared ownership could be. So I started kind of researching and trying to find more information from there.
And so can I just ask as well, what was your living situation beforehand? Were you rented with family? Or?
No, so I moved over from living abroad and moved directly back into living with family, which kind of gave us the opportunity to save and also get an idea of, because the last time I was living in the UK was about 8 years ago, and so obviously the climate changes, the surrounding areas where you may have grown up have changed as well. So I think it was gave the time to kind of look into the surrounding area, see if this is still the kind of general area I wanted to live in or not, whilst not having that big financial hit of also renting, because I know unfortunately at the moment for a lot of people that is a major financial burden.
Yeah, and what was it that made you fall in love with the particular area that you chose, and specifically the development?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positive things about that particular development. So the first, I had a kind of a checklist or a list of kind of non-negotiables for me when looking at properties, things that I had to have, and it wasn't the common things like I've got to have the big garden, I've got to have a big living room or things like that. It was more so, have you got good accessibility to kind of train links to go into London or further afield? transport links from a driving perspective, good schools as well, and also a close proximity to kind of friends and family, that it wasn't, you know, a big journey, and you could still get ongoing help if needed. So I think those were important things for me when looking at the journey. And then accessibility to things like green space. It was really important. You know, when you've got a young family, you want to be able to get out and about into nature, and so that was also really important when looking at this development.
It's great that you did that sort of research beforehand as well. I guess taking it over to you now, Jacqui. So you're a senior sales consultant for SO Resi. What kind of buyers are you seeing for shared ownership now?
It used to be a lot of first-time buyers, but to be quite honest, we find a lot of people that have gone through a divorce, or even a lot of the older generation. We've got quite a few of our retired people on our list that want to buy something near their families, but actually can't afford a property in that area, so shared ownership is the only way forward for them.
Yeah, it's not just first-time buyers anymore, is it?
No, it isn't.
But obviously Rochelle did so much research before she looked into that particular area and the property that was right for her. Where do most shared owners start their journey? Where would you recommend that they first start?
You can look on the website. There's a shared ownership website, sharedownership.co.uk, which has got a wealth of knowledge. I would recommend going to a financial IFA, going to an independent IFA, and finding out what you can afford, whether you can afford a 1-bed, 2-bed, what sort of deposits you need, just to give you a bit of an idea. Our website, SO Resi, also is full of useful information. And then look on Rightmove and platforms to find what's available in your areas.
Yeah, great place to start. And obviously there is a lot of information online, but there's also a lot of misconceptions. What sort of common misconceptions do you hear about shared ownership?
I think a lot of people think it's going to be a lot more expensive than they expect. They don't realise that you can put a deposit as low as 5% of the share you're buying, so that, you know, deposits can be quite low, and they don't realise that they can own something that's new and nice, rather than, you know, something small and not really what they want to have.
I guess, Rochelle, that was a key point for you as well, that deposit element.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a key point, because, you know, when in particular in my circumstance, where you've got a young family, you've got a plan for the future, and signing away a large deposit is sometimes not feasible. It takes a long time. I know for a lot of people who, you know, friends and various other people who are renting alongside trying to save, and it's really not feasible for you to save, you know, 30,000 to 50,000 that some people are requiring, and then if you add on top of that kind of the kind of legal financial costs and things like that, for some people it's the kind of the conception of home ownership is just not possible. And so the shared ownership kind of gives you the best of both worlds, where you don't have to sign away everything you've ever saved, but you can also get a fairly good stake in the property, and then can use other savings to, you know, do other stuff like staircasing or whatever it is you want to do moving forwards.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say that's a key point. You know, it does take time to save, and you can, you know, buy a share in a home and build your equity. But was there a right time for you, or did it happen more organically?
I think I started the process just in terms of saying, okay, during this year, my goal, and that's the year of 2024, by autumn 2024, ideally I'd like to have my own place and space. But it started, kind of the process started maybe around the October, November from 2023. That was when I started looking into what shared ownership was, doing the research, making sure that had the right documentation and updating those things as you go along, so that when I started looking at what developments were available in the surrounding area that I was looking at, I could confidently express interest, confidently say how much I had ready for a deposit, and then could move kind of more seamlessly through with the process. So I think, yes, I was kind of organised, but I don't think I was saying, okay, if I don't get anything this year, then I won't do it. I think it was kind of organic, but still you have to plan nonetheless.
And obviously you bought your home through SO Resi. There are other providers out there. But how supported did you feel throughout the process by SO Resi?
No, I think, from the first contact with the sales consultant of that particular development, I had a really positive experience. She was really knowledgeable. She was really supportive and, asked me important questions straight up, in terms of what kind of things are you looking for, and even before you viewed the property, whether this would meet the things that you are looking for or not. And I think that was really helpful for me, because it meant that I felt I had confidence in the process, and pointing me towards places where I could get more information if it was that I needed more information, clarifying those misconceptions that you were saying, was really helpful. And there was no kind of gatekeeping of any of the knowledge. It was really a very open two-way dynamic, either through text or through email, which made the process much easier.
And you just struck a key word there, knowledge. And how important was it to you as well to have a knowledgeable conveyancer do the legal work for you?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think people it's not just about the property and picking the right site and picking the right people who will be kind of running through the process to, like SO Resi, to buying the property. There is also a whole legal side of it as well. And you've got to pick people that, one, you kind of gel with, or seem that you have a good relationship with them. People who are quite timely on the information and give you a full layout of what the journey and the process looks like, and key points that you need to be ready with these documents around this time, and they need to be ready to go when we're waiting for updates and stuff like that. So I think it's really important. There are so many providers out there, and I think just doing your research again with what are the pros and cons of different people, and if you're not having a good experience, then feeling confident that there are other providers out there that you can pick as well. I was lucky that kind of felt like I struck the right, both from SO Resi but also from the conveyancing straight off, but I know that there are people who don't necessarily have that journey, so I think it's just feeling comfortable that you can choose.
And there are so many lawyers out there, it's just a bit of a minefield, isn't it? But having a lawyer that actually understands shared ownership, because it is a different type of tenure. I'm sure, Jacqui, you see it as well. Yes. Having a lawyer that isn't experienced in shared ownership can delay the process. But did you have, it's important as well to have people around you that are supporting you, I've found. Did you have sort of friends or family that helped guide you?
Yeah, so I think my parents were a big kind of source of support. I think they were initially apprehensive, as a lot of first time or young buyers are experiencing, their parents maybe from a generation where they're expected to save a certain deposit, buy things on the open market, and that's just how we do it. The concept of shared ownership is very new to them, and as with anything new, people will always feel apprehensive, especially if they come from a different generation. So I think during that process, it was about arming myself with enough information and knowledge that I could also educate them, because I think that is sometimes a barrier of getting people on your side, is making sure that people understand the whole process. And I think once they were on board and they understood the process, and they said, this looks like a really good and viable option for you, we totally support it. And now my brother's looking for his own shared ownership place, and I think my parents again are on board with that. So I think it's really important. It's a two-way kind of educational process for everyone involved, really.
Absolutely. I mean, home buying has changed so much in the last sort of 30, 40 years. It's a completely different experience to when, our parents bought their first homes. But Jacqui, you support so many buyers through that home buying process. What does it mean from a sales consultant perspective to sort of guide someone through that journey? How do you sort of overcome that sort of overwhelming feeling that a lot of buyers feel?
Well, obviously we get them to come to site and have a look round and show them what they can what they can get for their money. We usually get them to do a financial assessment, just so we know what they can afford to buy. And then we make them read the guides and the videos that we've got online. We generally go over the information again and again just to make sure they fully understand what shared ownership is, what they're buying and how much they're buying. And obviously we're on hand to hold their hands and literally take them through the process. It's quite rewarding to see them when they're so frightened at the start of their journey to then seeing them owning their own home.
Exactly. And Rochelle, that sort of buying process for you, what was that like? Did you come across any challenges along the way?
So if you take it back to the beginning, I think what was, as Jacqui's kind of just said, it's when you're looking around the properties, what's really nice is that you're really, well, at least in my experience, you're only showing the properties that you can afford. And I think that helps to already hone in your mindset on, okay, so I can get this, or, this is on the cards. And then you have that as like your goalpost. If you really want that property, you then move forwards with it. I think, as I said, making sure you've got all of your ducks in a row from in advance. So, not everybody's going to be in a position where you've got your deposit already and ready to go, but it is definitely beneficial if you already have those things kind of untouched, that you know how much you have to be able to put into the property and what percentage share that you can get. It definitely does help the process. And then the process itself was generally quite quick. It took between 6 to 8 weeks for the whole process, from the point of viewing the property for the first time to the completion date. So at times it felt very quick, but it didn't feel rushed. It just felt quick. And but having knowledgeable people on board to be able to ask the questions and to reassure you about the process was really helpful. So I think the buying process was pretty seamless from start to finish.
Yeah, and it is a lot quicker buying a new build. Jacqui, how long typically does it take?
It can take anything. I've moved somebody in 3 weeks from start to finish. It depends really what your notice period is. If you're renting, sometimes you've got to give 1 month or 2 months notice. So then it might take 2-3 months. But I wouldn't say more than 3 months. Obviously, with new build, it depends if we've taken handover of the properties. Sometimes.
And what does that mean?
So that means that the builders of the properties are complete, and the builders have finished them, and they've got their building certificates, and then they hand them over to us. So that means that we can start to move people in.
Excellent. Okay, and I think it's also probably worth the listeners understanding as well that buying a new home is typically a bit quicker than buying sort of a second-hand shared ownership home, so a resale property where you could be buying from a seller who's buying another home. So on average it could take a bit longer, 3-4 months, sometimes 6 we've seen if we've got some chains. But Rochelle, I know Homes England made some changes, and it was first come, first serve. Were there other buyers that were waiting to buy your home?
So I was made, I had explicitly asked the sales consultant, if there were other people who have expressed interest, because I think the property was still fairly new, as you just said, in terms of having the handover. I got in quite quickly after the property was kind of handed over, to view the property and then express interest. But what was really good from SO Resi was the fact that once I had met the affordability criteria, express interest and pay my deposit for that house, it's kind of a sole kind of, not really a bidding process, but you're moving through your legal journey without anybody else leapfrogging you through the process. So there were other people who were waiting, interested, and were waiting to be able to move to the next stages, but you're kind of afforded the opportunity to move through that process as far as you can get. And there are some times where it breaks down. I know some other properties within the building, other properties within the building, it broke down during that kind of legal journey for some of those people. But, at least you have the opportunity to get as far as you can. And I think that's really important, so you don't feel the level of pressure that you might be under kind of in the open market sometimes, where, you know, somebody else has got their deposit before you because they sold their house quicker, and all of a sudden they've leapfrogged you in the process and you've lost out. So I think that was really important.
Yeah, well, exactly. As well, on the open market, someone can come in and just offer a higher price, and then it's deal over. So it is good that there are those rules and regulations around shared ownership, and at least that piece can't happen. But Jacqui, is it quite common that you get multiple people wanting to buy the same property?
Yeah, it is. Quite often we might only get 10 or 15 properties off of a developer, and then you have a queue, you could have 100 people. So, you know, it is literally first come, first serve. So people just need to get their paperwork ready and in as quickly as they can to get with a chance to get one.
Yeah, and I think obviously that first come, first serve piece has been an evolution from Homes England. But Jacqui, how has shared ownership evolved over time?
Well, obviously we're looking at a lot longer leases nowadays. Staircasing is all improved. There's new regulations with that too, where you can buy 1% a year with no legal fees. So it's really come on leaps and bounds, and I think there's a lot more information nowadays, so people don't feel so scared of the product, which I think originally people were a bit scared, didn't know too much about it.
Thank you. And let's look at what it's like to actually live in a shared ownership home. So we haven't covered this on a podcast. We've talked about the process, but I'm really keen to understand what it's like for you, Rochelle, to actually live in a shared ownership home. I mean, what does being a shared owner really mean to you?
So I think it's important for people to understand that being a shared ownership kind of home owner does not, you don't, you know, own, yes, you may own 25% or 35%, but actually you have the whole property. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that you own and live in the property as if it were your own. Because I think some people have the misconception that it means that, oh, there's certain things that I can't do. And obviously, yes, there is a rental portion, and the property is still overall owned by, you know, whichever housing association it's associated with. So there are some restrictions in terms of like major structural stuff and stuff. But I think for the most part you can do quite a lot as if you were living there, and I think that's really important, to feel like this is my home, this isn't somewhere I'm just renting. So, you know, it's been a really rewarding journey for us being able to, over the last year or so, kind of make it our own, and you doing things like being a kind of first home buyer, you know, getting your furniture that you want for the first time, and just generally making the place be how you want, I think has been really nice.
Yeah, it's always a funny one to explain, because I speak to a lot of buyers, and we talk about sort of that rental piece, but it's not like you've got a landlord, it's not like a private landlord.
That's right.
The way I try to explain it is that you're financing your home in a different way. So you have a mortgage and the housing association helps to finance it. It's not a landlord tenant situation. But Jacqui, if somebody did want to change the kitchen or do something structural, is that allowed?
You have to write in and ask for permission, but as long as you write in and it's, you know, it's feasible, then yes, then they're given permission to do so. So yeah, you can do whatever you like. You can paint it, you can put up pictures, mirrors, wallpapers, units, but obviously anything structure you do write in and ask for permission.
And Rochelle, has living in a shared ownership home met your expectations?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would say it's met the expectations of what I expected before moving in. You know, we've got our own place. We've been able to, you know, kit it out how you want to. I think, you know, that from a payment perspective, it's met pretty much most of my expectations. You know, we're at the 1 year mark now where things have started to change, because you're moving from estimated costs for things like service charge and things to actual costs, because now the property that we're in is full occupancy, and obviously that comes with slightly different challenges. So I think, you know, it's so far to date has met my expectations of what I thought would happen as things move forwards.
Yeah, and you've mentioned service charges. Now, has that information been explained to you clearly?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people are worried about moving into it. A lot of people have maybe don't feel they have enough information and feel that maybe they've been slightly slighted by this hidden charge, but it's definitely not hidden. I think sometimes people perhaps in the whole process of everything get so caught up in the mortgage and all the other things that they are having to finance that they perhaps overlook the service charge aspect, because it's obviously at the beginning it's very small because it's based mainly on estimates for the building, and then it moves forward where actually now there are people living here, this is actually the living and running cost of the building. So I think it's been explained really well, and what's really nice is that you get both, well, I've been subject to getting both an email as well as a written letter well in advance of any changes, and also an appropriate breakdown of what the service charge is going towards, and you have an opportunity then to say, I see that the service charge is going towards XYZ, but I don't see that happening in my property. Can you explain that? And they're always willing to explain that in more detail or go through it with you and kind of highlight those things, which I think is definitely super important when technically you're a buyer or a homeowner, and it's really important to be interested in knowing as much about what you're paying as possible, trying not to just turn a blind eye and just doling out payments because you do have a stake in the place that you're in.
Yeah, I think obviously recent press reports, doesn't help with service charge. I think it's important for people to understand you pay a service charge if you live in a leasehold property. So whether that's shared ownership, whether it's on the open market, if there are services to the building, there's a service charge.
I think I've mentioned it before when talking at kind of other events. For people, when you're looking into the properties or choosing a property, think about what services your property has got. Like if it's really important that you've got 24-hour access parking, that you've got eight elevator shafts, or you've got a larger mass of grounds with fountains and stuff like that, just think about how that's going to impact your service charge, and whether these are services that you are going to be using on a regular basis. So for me personally, for the property that I'm in, I'm on a higher floor, but there are no elevators, and it was kind of important to me that I wasn't going to have to service an elevator that I probably wouldn't use. I'm somebody who would usually choose the stairs. So stuff like that, I think,
so that was
important.
a conscious decision.
Okay.
Yeah, fab. And Jacqui, obviously you welcome so many new homeowners into their properties. What sort of feedback do you get from residents once they've moved in?
Most people are just delighted to move into their brand new home. Everything's new. They've got something much nicer than they expected, but they've got security, because obviously when you're under a landlord, you're renting from a landlord, you never know when you're going to be served notice. So I think security is quite important to a lot of people. Just owning your own home, just knowing that it's yours. It's
a lovely
nice
feeling, isn't it? Handing someone over their keys.
Yeah, to give them the keys.
But Rochelle, what is next for you? Have you thought about staircasing? What's the plans?
Yeah, so definitely thought about things. So I signed up for kind of SO Resi Plus, which is this 1% staircasing kind of agreement, which was explained to me kind of at the beginning of the journey, just even before the completion date, just going through that process. So I think the next thing is looking to do the 1% staircasing, which is really nice because it's attractive that it's without additional legal fees, because I think people don't understand usually to staircase you'd need your property to be re-evaluated by a RIC surveyor, and then you are getting a 5% or 10% portion on that new valuation for the house, and then you've got to kind of remortgage and all those things as well. So I think it's really nice to have the opportunity to staircase based on the original market value of the house, and it's therefore predictable. Yes, there is going to be some degree of inflation, but it's fairly predictable in terms of the amount over the next 10 to 15 years, and that allows you to be able to plan accordingly and save accordingly, because you have 12 months to be able to do it for the year, and that is definitely feasible for most people. Even if you've got other financial commitments, saving that little bit each month, you'd be able to staircase by that 1%, and the rest of your costs will go down from the rental and service charge proportion.
Yeah, I mean that 1% might not seem like much, but built up over time.
Yeah, you can go from 25% to 40% ownership, over a 10 to 15 year period, which if you decide that you want to move on from the property, that investment that you've made may have a greater equity when you're trying to sell it, and that's kind of quite important for people, and it means you may have a larger amount of a deposit or larger amount of money that you can put towards a new property, which is really nice.
Yeah. And Jacqui, can you just explain the difference between that 1% and sort of traditional staircasing? How does it work?
So traditional staircasing used to be sort of like 10%. It's in 10% shares. So with just the 1%, obviously each year we see what the properties are valued at. You can buy 1%, but there's no legal fees for that. So obviously that's a lot easier to do for some people than paying, for a 10% share. And obviously the more that you own, the less rent you pay. Okay. So it's a great way to get more shares.
So the 1%, you don't need a RICS-val, you don't need a lawyer, you just transfer the money?
Yeah, so you just, my experience is that you can't contact the after-sales team, so SO Resi is put into kind of like, is split. So you have your main contact is with the after-sales team, and you say, listen, I'm ready to staircase by the 1%. Can I get a valuation of what that looks like? They send you through what the amount is, and there's an expiration date of when that value ends by, and then all you do is just say you're ready, transfer the money, and then everything else is done for you behind the scenes, which is really good. You get a new memorandum saying you now have this percentage in the property, and it's fairly simple.
Excellent. Now, Rochelle, I know you haven't been in your home that long, but have you thought about your next move? What does that look like?
I think we've started looking at other places to see, as we move forwards and the family grows and stuff like that, looking to get other things like a place with a garden and stuff like that. But it's not something we're actively looking at right now. But, it's nice to know that there is the opportunity, if you sell this property, that you can also get another shared ownership property, and that there are other places, lots of developments which are coming up here, there and everywhere. So there's quite a lot of choice and moving forward, which is really nice.
And I know you've been obviously looking at building equity by doing the 1% every year, but have you actually looked into equity growth and house prices in your area?
Yeah, so I think I did a lot of that before looking to move forward with the property as well. So I think that's a really important point when people are looking at the property that they're trying to get. It's not just the location, but also looking to see what are properties of similar size and similar specification, what are they going for in the area, because you can get an idea if the property was to be revalued at the point of sale, how much could you realistically potentially make in terms of improved equity on the property. And I think that's really important. So I started looking into that before even going into the home buying process. Obviously, as things move and change, more properties come online in an area, and sometimes you can get a bit of saturation because of that. But I think it's really important you've got to understand house prices go up, they go down, but if you have a general idea of what the properties are going for in the surrounding area, you can get an idea when somebody comes to value your property, that you have a better idea of saying, there's a bit of a low valuation based on my expectations of what properties are going for in the area, and you can kind of contest that with a surveyor.
Yeah, and Rightmove has some really good tools for that, doesn't it? You can actually see whether prices are going up or down in the area. But Jacqui, what does it mean? Rochelle picked up on a point of oversaturation in an area. What would that actually mean for a homeowner?
So in some areas where it's oversaturated, then obviously property prices could go down as well as going up. So you may not, in some areas, they find that they haven't made much money, or even the values could have gone down. So yeah, that is the only risk that you take, but it's worth doing your homework. But then, to be quite honest, quite a lot of people, it's still much cheaper than privately renting, so they don't mind where they live. Yeah. And at that time, they're not worried about oversaturation or anything, just about finding their new home.
So moving on from house prices then, let's talk about the product very briefly. Jacqui, we've seen reforms come into play. Shared ownership has really evolved. Can you see any other changes ahead for shared ownership?
I think it's just going to get better and better. To be quite honest, with house pricings going up so much, deposits are so large, I think shared ownership is going to be the only way forward for a lot of the younger generation and, well, for all generations. So there's a lot of information out there. So I'd say to anyone, just do your research before you get started.
Research is absolutely key. And Rochelle, if I could put you in a time machine and you go right back to the beginning, what advice would you give to your former self?
I think knowing a bit more about what stamp duty is and just knowing, where does that fall? Because I think when that decision came on you, whether you want to pay no stamp duty, if you're eligible to pay no stamp duty, if you're a first-time buyer, paying a portion based on the percentage of this kind of sale of, or the percentage of the home that you are going for, or whether it's on the whole market value of the house. And I think meeting myself at that crossroads and then not knowing what might be the right decision to make at that point, I think I would have liked to have known more before coming to that crossroads. So I think that's probably important.
Yeah, and asking a lawyer as well. In fact, asking a lawyer is a really good way of seeing whether they understand shared ownership or not. Ask the stamp duty question, because if they can answer it straight away, they know shared ownership. Thanks, Rochelle. And Jacqui, what would be your top tip to anyone looking to buy?
Again, do your research, but literally find an independent IFA and find out what you can afford. Find out what you can afford in your area, and go along and have a look and speak to your sales consultant and get as much information as you can.
Fab. Some great tips from both of you. Thank you so much. It's
for
been
having us.
Wonderful about learning about your shared ownership experience, and thank you, Jacqui, from SO Resi, for talking us through that process.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. Now, if you'd like to learn more about shared ownership, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there's any topics that you'd like covered, please feel free to leave us a comment. You can find us on all the main podcast platforms: YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Until next time, this is So in the Know.